She thought it was just a small act of kindness, paying for a stranger's gas at a quiet roadside station. A single black mother, exhausted after her shift, unaware that the man she helped was part of a feared biker gang. But that simple gesture would soon save her life, because that night, the shadows she'd been running from finally caught up, and the next evening, those same bikers returned, not for revenge, but for justice. What happens when kindness crosses paths with danger, and fate decides to even the score? It was late, the kind of late where the streets are quiet and every sound feels heavier than it should. Danielle, a single black mother of two, had just finished her second shift at a small diner on the edge of town. Her uniform still smelled of coffee and fries, and her feet ached from standing all day. But she didn't complain. She couldn't. Every extra hour meant another meal, another bill paid, another day her kids could dream without worry. That night, as she stopped at a gas station under the pale glow of flickering lights, she noticed a group of bikers, leather vests, roaring engines, and stares that made others look away. Everyone avoided them, but not Danielle. When one of them came up short at the pump, she quietly offered to pay. Just a few dollars. Just kindness. She drove home thinking nothing of it, unaware that her life had just intertwined with theirs. Because somewhere beyond that act of generosity, someone else was watching her too. Someone who didn't have good intentions. The next few days blurred together for Danielle. Work, home, kids, repeat. But something felt off. It started small. A car parked across the street longer than it should have, headlights flickering through her curtains late at night. Then the phone calls came. Silent at first, just breathing. Then whispers, ugly words, racial slurs, and threats that made her blood run cold. She told herself it was nothing, maybe a wrong number, maybe paranoia, but deep down, she knew better. Ever since she moved into that neighborhood, mostly white, mostly quiet, she'd felt the eyes, the subtle hostility at the grocery store, the landlord's hesitant tone when she'd signed the lease, the mothers at her kids' school who clutched their purses just a little tighter. Still, she stayed strong. She always had to. Her kids needed her to smile, to act like the world was safe. But one night, that illusion shattered. It was just past midnight. She was folding laundry when she heard something, the sound of gravel crunching outside her window. Then a faint tapping. When she peeked through the blinds, her breath caught. Two men stood near her car, flashlights moving along the hood, one of them laughing quietly. She couldn't see their faces clearly, but the Confederate flag patch on one jacket said enough. Fear crawled up her spine. She called the police, whispering every word, but by the time they arrived, the men were gone, and the officer barely looked interested. "Probably kids messing around," he said, eyes scanning her modest apartment like he was judging her instead of helping. "You should just keep your doors locked." That night, Danielle barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards made her heart jump. And the next day, things got worse. She found a note under her windshield. "You don't belong here." Her kids noticed her fear, though she tried to hide it. She stopped letting them play outside, stopped answering the phone. The world had suddenly turned small, like her life had shrunk into the few safe corners of her home. Then, on the third night, something unexpected happened. As she drove home from work, she passed the same gas station where she'd met the biker, the man she'd helped with gas days earlier. His crew was there again, engines rumbling in the dark. For a second, their eyes met through the glass. He nodded once, almost like he recognized her. She didn't think much of it, not until later that night when the knocking came again. Louder this time, more aggressive. Her heart pounded as she grabbed her phone, ready to call for help. But before she could dial, the sound of motorcycles filled the street. Deep, thunderous, and getting closer. Headlights flooded her front yard. Tires screeched, voices shouted, and for the first time in days, Danielle didn't feel alone. What she didn't know was that her quiet act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, one that would turn fear into fury and prejudice into protection. Something was about to happen that her neighborhood would never forget. The roar of engines echoed through the night like a storm breaking loose. Danielle froze by the window, clutching her phone as shadows moved outside. The same car that had been watching her all week sat across the street, its headlights off. Two men stepped out, the same ones she'd seen before. One carried a bat, the other, something worse. They started toward her porch. Her kids were asleep upstairs. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The pounding on the door began, violent and unrelenting. "Come out!" one of them yelled. Her heart hammered so hard it hurt. She whispered a prayer, tears streaming down her face. Then, the sound that split the night. The deep, rolling thunder of motorcycles. A dozen headlights flared to life at once, cutting through the dark like fire. The men on her porch froze. The road outside filled with the same bikers from the gas station. Leather vests, steel boots, and a cold, fearless energy that swallowed the night. The leader stepped forward, the same man she'd helped days ago. His face was calm, but his eyes were fire. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just looked at the two men, and they knew. This wasn't a fight they could win. The stalkers backed away slowly, muttering, panicked. Tires screeched as their car tore off into the darkness. The bikers stood there for a moment, engines rumbling like a warning to anyone else watching. Danielle stood at her window, shaking, unable to believe what she'd seen. The man turned his head slightly, just enough for her to know. He remembered. That one small act of kindness had come full circle. But as the motorcycles rolled away into the night, she realized something chilling. Justice had come that evening, but not from the system meant to protect her, and that truth, that realization, would stay with her forever. By morning, the street was quiet again, but Danielle's world had changed forever. The police showed up hours later, taking notes, pretending to care. They called it a misunderstanding, wrote down her statement, and left. No arrests, no follow-up, no protection. But the word had spread. And the men who once stalked her never came back. Fear had been replaced by something else. Awareness. Not safety, not trust, but the realization that sometimes justice wears no badge. For days, Danielle couldn't stop thinking about it. How a group of men society labeled as dangerous had been the ones to protect her, while those sworn to serve her looked the other way. It forced her to see the world differently, not in black and white, but in shades of truth that most people refuse to face. She went back to work, back to her routine, but she walked with her head higher. Not because she felt safe, but because she refused to live in fear anymore. And as she tucked her kids in at night, she whispered to herself that she would teach them kindness anyway, not because the world always deserved it, but because kindness was her rebellion against hate. Stories like Danielle's happen quietly, in the corners of a country that still pretends equality is universal. Sometimes the victims don't speak, sometimes justice never comes, and sometimes it comes roaring down the street on two wheels. Because racism doesn't always wear a uniform, and heroes don't always look the way we expect. So the next time you see someone standing alone, ask yourself, if kindness can start a chain of justice, what could your small act set in motion? Maybe the real change begins with us.